Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Asadi. Thank you, Hilton, for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity, LeanIX executives, Andre, and others, for giving me this opportunity to be with you here and engage with you, hopefully at a conversational level, to share my experience in the space of EA. I've been in enterprise architecture since late 90s, when I was working for a very large company in financial industry. And as I moved from financial industry to high tech, to consulting, to education, back to high tech, and EA has always been part of my career and very central to what I've been doing and what I'm passionate about doing. I think the only reason I can be standing up here and talking with an hour and a half worth of sleep is the passion that I have for this topic. So that's a proof. All right, so many of you may have seen this slide, and I see, yes. The reason I use this slide to start the conversation with you is because speaking at conferences of this scale is usually difficult because you don't know your audience. So I've tried to consider a wide range of audience and make sure there is something that you're going to take away with you. Now, some of you may have been, according to this slide, may have been part of the business side of the discussion, or may have been on the technology side of the discussion. One way or the other, you can relate to this slide, and you can see how easy it is to misunderstand each other. What the requirements are, whether you use waterfall, whether you use agile, there's still room for misunderstanding and producing an elephant instead of a horse at the end. Now, as we go through this topic, although it is technology related, I want to make sure that we connect the technology to the business that we're all engaged in. It is easy for us, again, because of our interest and passion, to get really focused on the technology aspect of what we're doing, instead of focusing on our business acumen, understanding the business of our company, understanding the financial lexicon that our executives and C-level executives use, and bottom line, really get disconnected with the whole business strategy that the whole company is under, or the operational strategies that are enabling us to fulfill the goals of the business strategy. So in any position that we are in, I hope you do your best to stay connected with the business value and the business strategy and goals that your company has, regardless of what industry you're in and what company you work on. Now, one of the realities of our environment, again, being in technology, is that our environment continuously changes. We have many, many software and hardware that are being produced on a daily basis. And as you can see, every 3 months, this ecosystem changes. Just staying on top of these changes requires a big crowd of people. And it's humanly not possible practically, right? So you need to focus on figuring out how you're going to navigate your way through this ocean of opportunities and possibilities and options that you have. Because enterprise architecture, as was mentioned by Andre, should enable us to make decision-making easier and faster. Why? Because we need to have reliable data. We need to have insight. We need to enable our business partners to prioritize their choices in a much better, reliable way. And being able to navigate in an environment that is so dynamic is not an easy achievement. On top of all of that complexity that we have, recently, as you may be part of the conversations or attending conferences that Gartner provides, there are top technology trends that all of us, one way or the other, are being impacted by. So keep that ocean of changes from the previous slide. Add to it these trends that we're all facing and we need to cope with. We may or may not be impacted by all of these based on the line of business that we are in, but I'm sure that all of us, we can pick at least one space or two that directly impacts our line of business, what we are doing today, and how we need to change to stay in business. Out of the 10 trends, I picked smart spaces just to, I thought that would be a little bit, out of the 10 would be easier for all of us to relate to. And see how that trend really is associated with enterprise architecture and why we need to be aware of that as practitioners in EA. Smart space, there is a definition of it if you're not familiar with it, is basically physical or digital environments populated by humans and enabled by technology, which are increasingly connected, intelligent, and automated and autonomous, basically. Now, let's look at the chart next to it, to the right. Phase 1 is about isolated systems. Now, keep the smart space in mind. In order to be able to play in this space and be responsive to this trend, right, and not allow it to kill us, we need to be able to navigate, again, towards right. Staying isolated is not going to get us anywhere. We need to become connected rather quickly. And then from there, we need to get coordinated. And then from there, we can extract intelligence and have an intelligent environment for driving the insights that we need for faster decision-making, prioritization, and delivery of the business value, basically. Many of the companies, particularly those that are smaller, practice architecture in an isolated way. You have silo groups. You have shadow ITs. You have servers under somebody's desk. They're all playing a role impacting your enterprise architecture and weakening it, right? As fast as we can, we need to get in front of these silos. We need to minimize them. You may not be able to eliminate them all, but you need to minimize doing architecture in silos, get connected as quickly as you can from systems point of view, and gradually grow on that maturity model to get to the point that you need to be in today's market again, to be able to deliver the value that your business is intending to deliver to its shareholders and customers. Now, in my past experiences and recent experiences, anyone that I talk to, they're still doing architecture in this manner. The tools they're using are Excel and PowerPoints. In my career, I have attempted at building architecture reference models, frameworks, the tools that support it behind the scene. I've gone through at least 3 or 4 iterations of that effort. From being 100% homegrown to partnering with a third party, delivering that. It's a huge effort to do that. But what is exciting for us, or for me, the reason that I got engaged with LeanIX, is that this SaaS application practically takes all of that effort and worriness that you need to have about the tool itself that supports enterprise architecture away from you. It allows you to focus on what is important, right? I used to have 4 to 8 people just worrying about the tool, doing the visual modeling for us, working with the architects, collecting the data, putting it into the tool, upgrading the tool. Tool is not securely up to date. It goes on and on and on and on, the challenges, right? However, with LeanIX, we were able to rather quickly transition from practicing architecture in this environment to a very connected environment. As Andre was pointing out, having the connectivity of your systems, your IT components, your applications, your user groups, however you want to slice and dice your data by brands or by region, it's significantly important to the work that an architect is doing and subsequently to the decision that an executive needs to make. And that's what we are here to help the executives with. In enterprise architecture, again, it may be practiced differently in different companies, but usually you have the role of the advisor. You consult, you provide information. If they want you to make the decision, we'll be happy to make that decision for them, right? But ultimately, you want to be a player at the table where decisions are made so you can influence, you can provide insight, but you want to make sure that insight is up to date and is reliable. And you're able to produce it rather quickly. I've been in situations where everybody remembers 2008 when the market was going really bad and it was down and we're all being impacted. Vendors were being pretty much coming off the radar left and right very quickly and impacting all of their customers, basically. CIO wants to know what's the impact on our vendor ecosystem and how much we need to be worried about and how much backup plan we have. That's a lot of information that you need to be collecting and in an effort working and collaborating with your sourcing or procurement. None of that was available, and we had to go back to our beloved Excel file, right? Send it around to all the VPs, directors, up and down the chain of command, and collect all that information, start analyzing, parallelizing, doing this, doing that, to answer a simple question. However, with the cloud environment and the SaaS environment, we're able to collect this information much faster and gain insights from it to answer those type of questions much, much faster, right? And that is all cost saving to the company. Those are all use cases where enterprise architecture can add value, right? Now, going from here to there, it's also a cultural shift. It is a paradigm change, right? So these things don't come about overnight. You can't just go from exercising enterprise architecture off of PowerPoint and Excel overnight to a connected SaaS application. It usually takes at least a year and a half for executives to start that conversation, start the influence for the concept of the enterprise architecture, and gradually get to the point where they establish the practice, because they are building the case, business case, for the use of enterprise architecture, right? So they can invest multi-million dollars in hiring people, paying people to be the architects or establish the practice in the company. So where I'm going with this is there has to be a return in their investment, right? It's a multi-million dollar investment into the company, and they have to see return in their investment. Otherwise, just like many other things, we're going to be slashed very quickly. Now, these could be, again, depending on the line of business you're in, any of these could be the reason why you need to have an enterprise architecture in your company. Depending on how you want to tell the story, right? Any of these reasons could be the driver. But what is important is for us to have tangible use cases, to be able to prove that these are actually the reasons that enterprise architecture should exist and continue to exist, right? This is where, as Andre was talking about, knowing your business capabilities come to play a critical role here. It's through your business capabilities that you connect to your business strategies, to your business goals, and from there, then you can say, okay, here's the technology environment that supports and enables those business capabilities. Now, as enterprise architects, you definitely want to avoid having purely technology conversations with your business partners. You want to show that you're committed to the business by knowing your business language, by knowing your business acumens, by knowing the terminologies, by knowing their pain points, by knowing what is important to them and what their priorities are. If you can demonstrate that commitment to the business as an architect, then definitely they're going to see the value you're going to be delivering to them. But if you're just going to be a technologist for the sake of being a technologist, because that's where your interest is, from an architectural point of view, you're not going to be able to hit the mark, right? I see some heads shaking and nodding, right? So this is why I'm saying it's a paradigm shift. It's a cultural shift, because if you're in the IT space or product development space, it is very difficult to you feel like, no, I'm a technologist. This is what I want to be doing. I don't want to be disconnecting myself from that and, just have business conversation. Business folks can have that, and they can tell me what they want, and I'll build and develop that for them. That is not what we're talking about. We need to demonstrate that we understand we are with them as partners in the business. We understand their language, we understand their pain points, we understand their critical business capabilities. Then we can take all of that information, translate it into technology, right? What does it mean from application domain? What does it mean from IT components domain? What does it mean from security, from BI, from storage, from cloud versus on-prem? So try to look at enterprise architecture from a top-down perspective rather than a bottom-up. If you're in the beginning of your journey for establishing enterprise architecture as a practice or as a function, usually the suggestion is to make sure that it is top-down driven to be successful. If you start from the bottom, you may miss the mark, and you may not be able to hit the value as fast as you want. But if you come from the top and you have executive support, it's a much easier way to get to the point and to the value that you're there to deliver to them. Now, saying what I'm saying, it's much, much easier than actually executing and doing it, right? So usually, for the past 2 or 3 times that I have exercised this model, you want to, as I mentioned, want to get away from that silo architecture, develop your connected view, but at the same time, you want to speak to your standards. You want to demonstrate as a company all together, where do we stand against the industry? How relevant I am, and what is my degree of separation from them, right? Does that make sense? And standards is a good way of gauging that. And it's a good way of highlighting the gaps that we have as a company, as whole, not just marketing or just finance or IT or any other functions. Then it gets to generating some useful, insightful models and reports. And that is, again, one of the highlights and the key features of the LeanIX tool, that they have so many predefined reports that just by putting your data in there, you automatically generate those reports. That in the past, we have not been able to do that. Generating a report in an automated way would have taken many, many months and many hours of effort to do so. But the beauty of it is that those models that you generate, they're object-oriented. So as your objects change, upgrade, or get retired, it gets to be reflected on your visual model. And you can easily, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You can easily show a current versus a future model. You can speak to the pain points. You get to say, based on the conversations that I've had with my business partners, these are the pain points that we have understood, and here is its translation in our ecosystem technically. You can easily pinpoint. Then you can say, okay, here's the roadmap that I propose to get us out of that hole. How am I going to migrate from my current architecture with the pain points that I have to my future architecture, right? And how much time or cost it's going to take and resources. And so that's where doing your roadmap makes a significant impact. If you remember, I kept mentioning connecting to the business goals, to the business strategy, and here is why this is important. Your roadmap speaks to how well you understand the priorities of the business, right? And it also shows how far away you are from reality. So staying on top of that, it's a good way to demonstrate that you're on top of your line of business, you are fully informed, you have an outside-in view, which is all those trends that we were talking about, right? Your risks, your competition, name it. All of that can come into your view, but you do have a current architecture. You get to base that against that reference point. And your future roadmap should speak to what needs to change in order to be responsive to those changes, either from inside, due to business goals, new business models, or from outside, right? Now, many of us may be on our journey for digitalization in our businesses, or we may be at the beginning of it. We're just reading, researching, understanding it, and then doing a self-assessment inside our company. One of the key roles that architecture has is regarding being responsive to that change, to see that change proactively, not reactively. We want to be able to identify the change, understand its impact, and through roadmaps, through business capabilities, through goal settings, bring it up, get attention, start the conversation with the business first, then our technologists, right? These are the examples, if you were a record company or if you were Blockbuster, right? We all know many companies who did not respond to the change. They were not proactive with it, and ultimately they went out of business. And architecture, enterprise architecture, not solution architecture, not business architecture, not domain architecture, enterprise architecture, which is a combination of all these, right? Has this responsibility to raise the awareness, bring the attention, prioritize it, roadmap it, size it from dollar, from headcount. Again, start the conversation at a minimum. This is the minimum that we can do, start the conversation till we can get to the point of changing and executing against it. But these changes that are at a macro level, they're going to introduce new business models to your operation, right? So if you're not digitalized today and you're going for a digital business strategy, that is going to be impacting your business model. Your company, your culture, your people need to be open to that. You can't just say, okay, this is what we're going to be doing, and then as a result of it, we're going to be digitalized, and then problem is solved and we're up to date. It's a massive effort. Your operational model is going to be impacted, your strategies are going to be impacted, and so will your business model. As a result of digitalization, you may need to be opening new markets, new segments, new customers, and you need to have a way of observing those, supporting those, moving the business forward. And so these changes cannot be taken lightly. And that's why connecting it to the business capabilities again is very important for us to highlight the gaps that we may have in our business capabilities. Do I make sense? Yeah? Am I resonating? Are you experiencing some of those pressures? Is that something that keeps you up at night? It certainly does for me, to make sure that I'm not missing the beat on many of those topics. Now, I mentioned slicing and dicing the data. Here is one way. This is the application view of it. We need to be, again, on top of what is happening, what's changing, what is new, what is old, and the relevancy of it to our line of business. To determine, again, what we need to change, how soon, and what the magnitude of that change is going to be from impact to the business. I'm not going to read through this, but you can see you may be able to identify where you stand in this map, where your applications are in the current state, where it is in the future state. Current state is in the middle, future, and the gaps that you may have that you need to be addressing. So there is not a dull moment in architecture for us. If anybody's bored in architecture, there is something missing. There's always work to do. There is no shortage of challenge, and there is no shortage of questions to be answered, and no shortage of discovering and researching and analyzing and driving the conversation. I keep emphasizing the conversation, right? Ultimately, it's going to become a decision, but everything starts with a conversation, and as architects, we have a key role in driving that. How much time do I have? I'm sorry? That includes Q&A? Okay. All right, so I have about 2 or 3 slides left to go. I have tried to summarize what I think are the success factors to establishing a successful enterprise architecture based on my failures and successes in the past. As I mentioned early on, having an executive sponsor on the top is really critical. It should be, in my opinion, top-down driven and not bottom-up. And when you have, for instance, a CIO, which is usually the first champion, or a COO who really is passionate, understands this, and is supporting you, makes a huge difference in your acceleration. You're moving forward. And so going back to that C-suite, C-level individuals in the company, you really need to understand who they are and what keeps them up at night, what are their pain points, what are their goals. You don't have to address and reach out or do something about all of the goals. You can always prioritize, because at the beginning you're a small group. You're 1 or 2 or 3 people. You're not going to be hiring 30, 40 architects to address everything. So you have to have a way of prioritizing and deprioritizing based on knowing who your C-level executives are. Next to that is connected to business outcome. Anything you do, try to quantify it. If you can't quantify it, try to qualify it. Have metrics, have measurement connected to your business goals. Make sure you're succinct, very clear in how you're impacting your business. That's how you want to be delivering your architecture story. If you haven't figured that out, or you don't know how to connect it, reach out to your peers and partners, people that you're going to be networking with, to make sure you don't miss on that piece. Because they're not going to, in this nowadays, your executives are not going to be giving you, a few years to figure this out. You got a couple of years maximum to figure it out. Show the results. If they don't see that you're in the right direction and you're doing the right thing for the right purpose, again, that's the end of the practice. And the EA gets that notion of being hype, being data entry exercise, not giving the value, why do we do this, right? Counterproductive, totally inefficient. Third is impact analysis. We need to be proactive with regard to the changes that we are introducing, technical or on the business side. We need to have a way, an ability to conduct that analysis, to be able to show if we are changing an ERP system, or we are going from 100% on-prem system to hybrid cloud environment, or virtualizing your server's environment for whatever reason. What is the impact on the business, and what is the impact on the bottom line, and what is the impact on the technology, basically? Everybody views IT being part of the cost side of the formula, not the benefit and the profit part of the formula. And architecture is one way that we should be able to change and shift that thinking. Recently, I was reading that only 34% of transformational efforts or projects or initiatives are successful. So still the failure rate is really high. And transformational efforts is a critical part where EA plays a significant role. If there is a transformational effort in the company and you're not plugged in, there is something wrong. You should be part of the conversation. You shouldn't miss the beat on that one, for sure. Why? Because you're the one who should be providing the outside-in view, and also understanding, because of your understanding of the inside, you'll be able to provide insightful points, arguments, to the conversation. And you don't want that decision to go too far out to get to the execution and implementation, and then later on to learn that, oop, we missed something. If I knew, or if we knew, if somebody had told us, if we had the information when we needed it, right? Or we did have it, but the information was outdated. It wasn't reflecting the current environment that we have, which is, again, why we need a connected system that is current. And with SaaS applications, it's much easier to do that than the legacy client-server models that we used to have. Fourth item is architecture roadmap, and I think I have mentioned that a number of times. Here, you don't want to be too heavy-handed, but make sure it's flexible enough. It reflects, again, the reality. Make sure your current is really current architecture, so your target architecture is meaningful and relevant and useful. And lastly, you definitely need to have an architecture review board where you bring, a number of your experts to the table to review some of these key projects, key transformational efforts that you have on a regular basis, and make sure that the right feedback is provided to them, whether it's related to the technology architecture or the business architecture. Andre was showing, one of the new changes that they have is by putting the description of the application into tool, it automatically is going to recommend what business capabilities that application should be connected to, right? So that ARB team can help you, should help you, to make sure you have picked the right business capabilities for that technology project that is going on, and not the wrong one. And if it is, or if there is a disagreement, that needs to be discussed to understand whether we have the right capabilities, wrong capabilities. We need to break it down. We need to consolidate some of our capabilities. So it drives the conversation again. ARB drives the conversation, provides the right feedback to ensure that we make the right decisions. This is an example of an architecture standard that we were talking about as one of the low-hanging fruits, very quick, you should be able to produce to show that you can add value. And I'm gonna move on to the next. Some people are taking pictures with them. And at last, just want to summarize everything. I call it a tapestry. From a vision point of view, you justify your existence. You can approach enterprise architecture in multiple ways, heavy-handed or in a light way. Your goal initially can be just to capture, because we don't have a single repository, we don't know what we have. And if we don't know what we have, so we don't know what we don't know, right? You can't expect us to make right decision at the right time and have the right influence. Or you can position EA for influencing the decisions, or you can position EA to drive. What is it to drive? It can drive your annual strategic planning, right? It can drive your service models that you have, depending on what the operational model of your IT is. Is it purely project-oriented, product-oriented, or IT as a service, right? So EA has a different role to play depending on which model you have in your operation. So in your vision, you can figure that out. And then, of course, there's ambition that comes with it. You gotta have a clear timeline and approach. Again, making sure you deliver value, you focus on business outcomes, you're speaking to the right folks. And your architecture organization needs to be well-known. People know who to contact, what to contact them for. And after all, architecture is about the what and the why, not the how piece, which is part of the process, right? So we better get this picture right. So we have tackled the what aspects of our organization, our team. And then you have platform choices to make to address some of the needs that you have for architecture collaterals to justify the decisions or, again, the directions that you're proposing at various times. And you have to have metrics. So that's my story.